This is Rashamini, Adamini Corp, coming to you live from Charlotte, North Carolina. And we got a slightly new setup. You see, no chalkboard, no physics. We're going to talk about genomic stability. We're going to talk about COVID-19. There's a lot going on. I'm going to start to do these podcasts more frequently. If you want to hear them, definitely like and comment. Let's have a discussion. Things are moving too fast for us to take a week to get new data and new facts, to take too long to communicate. So I've heard a rumor that in Charlotte, North Carolina, they're going to mandate vaccines for COVID-19. And I think this is a terrible, terrible idea. I think it borders on unconstitutional, if not unethical. I don't know if the Constitution was ever framed in such a way as to protect us from, I guess, maybe unwanted, unlawful search and seizure. If you're putting something in my body that's going to last for the rest of my life, is there a constitutional argument against that in terms of invading my personal privacy, or is my body my property, and you putting a foreign object in it is the same as entering my house without a warrant. Now maybe they can create a warrant to enter your house with some sort of vaccine, but this is terrible because vaccines take years and years to develop. Now let's talk about vaccines a little bit. There's a lot of discussion, and if you can hear the water falling, that's because my system is producing tea right now. And let me do a plug for Genomic Stability. So this right here is a dose of basil microgreens that I've grown after reading about 30 or so scientific papers. I've determined that microgreen tea is the solution to our chronic health problems, and is the issue at hand at COVID-19. Ultimately, this virus is affecting people with weakened immune systems. One way or another, your body isn't able to manage its onslaught. And my theory is simple. If we strengthen our immune cells, then we will have a higher likelihood of not being hospitalized by a highly virulent, highly potent version of the flu. So I did my homework and I assembled 12 scientific articles that describe how I came to this conclusion. Basically, here's the 7 talking points. Follow my logic here. Your body creates 100 billion immune cells every day. Your intake of vitamins and minerals directly affects your cell health. The crops that we grow in the soil are decreasing in nutritional density, partially because of soil demineralization, and mostly, or more than half perhaps, due to the types of foods we're growing. We're hybridizing crops for flavor and shelf stability, and that's decreasing the amount of nutrients in there. We're not hybridizing for nutrients. Synthetic vitamins don't absorb into new cells, while natural plant extracts do. So we all have to, at the end of the day, produce our own plant extract. That's what I'm doing here. That's what this is. We've open sourced the designs. You can grow your own plant. You can produce your own plant extracts at home. Stack.farm. Microgreens are very high in both vitamins and minerals. Basil has the highest concentration of macro and microminerals of 12 common herbs, and fresh herbs have higher nutritional content versus their dried counterparts. So what I'm doing is twofold. There's 3 ways to get this stuff into your body. You can grow it yourself. It's not that hard. It's not that expensive. Basil microgreens, specifically, if you grow microgreens, harvest them, steep them in water, hot water, boiling water for 20 minutes, you're 80% of the way there. Now we're producing a tea, a liquid tea that I don't have on me, and selling at the local stores. We can't ship that very cost effectively, so we have a dried version that you can make a tea for your house, for your own home. This is going out to cancer patients in my network. This is going out to people with COVID and their caretakers, because you're making 100 billion new immune cells every day. You need a bioavailable and full spectrum of vitamins and minerals to go into those cells so that they can be built and function properly. Basil is the highest of those, has the highest concentration of those micro macro minerals. Microgreens have the highest concentration of vitamins. So growing a microgreen, you're like halfway there. Make it yourself, buy it from us. Go to your unless you live in the Charlotte area, you won't be able to buy the local tea, but it's a system costs you, if you buy it from us, it's like $500. You can build your own for $350, and you can produce this stuff hands off in an automated fashion. I'm constantly R&Ding for a larger pilot plant to produce more tea, but that's a whole other issue. You can get going on your own. So genomic stability, that's what really this is all about. We're all waiting for a vaccine because the press is freaking everybody out, and we feel like you go out into the supermarket and anybody can have COVID-19. What's included in what, my good sir, Michael? So what's included? What do you mean? And it feels like the virus is all around us. The press is definitely in the packet. It's really simple. It's literally basil seeds grown to 2 weeks old, harvested, no worries, with the roots intact, dried, and then I put it into a tea bag. You put this, there's a full process. The full process to make the tea at home includes steeping it in hot water for 20 minutes, refrigerating that overnight, and then putting that cup of tea in direct sunlight for an hour. I know this is kind of weird, but this is what happens. So when you grow the plants whole or live and you put them into boiling water, there are antioxidants, and it's called ordered water that's in the actual plant itself surrounding the cells. And this structured water has been proven out of University of Washington to increase the energy production of cells and actually help mitochondria or proteins. It gives them like a lattice. It's like a gelatinous type of water that we have in our bodies and plants have in their bodies. And it's formed naturally at a specific frequency of near infrared light, like 1200 or so nanometers, 1240, something like that. You can't really buy bulbs that produce that, but the sun does it naturally. This is also why on a lake, if you see a boat go across the lake, you see where the boat was going. It's because the water is gelatinous just at that maybe millimeter on the top, and it reflects light differently. So this gelatinous water is really important. It separates charge, it filters, it supports proteins, it increases cellular ionic uptake, it increases mitochondrial or energy production in the cell. It's like really, really important for life. It's the battery of cellular life, which is life ultimately. So making it from live plants is really important. And then if you get this stuff though, you can get back, even though it's dehydrated, you get the micro minerals and vitamins out of it. But when it's boiling like that, the gelatinous structure of the water, of this ordered water, gets destroyed because the water molecules are moving so slowly. So you want to cool it so all the water molecules slow down, and then put it in sunlight so it gets that infrared frequency of light, which then recharges, so to speak, the water and reorders it. And then when you do that, you're going to get like 80%, I would estimate, of the benefits if you just make tea out of this. But when you do that other half of that process, you get the water that becomes structured, helps the nutrients in here get into your cells faster and more readily, with your body working less to get it. So a lot of biophysics there. I'm actually really excited about it. But the problem is that we're all waiting for a vaccine. And I've done my research, and let me grab a book. Okay, I'm not anti-vaccine by any stretch of the imagination, but this book has freaked me out because I don't think there's any evidence to suggest that the vaccines themselves are detrimental to human health. Like, they can give you the illness if there's a live virus in the vaccine, but the real danger from these vaccines are I think they're called subjugates, what are they called? It's like the preservatives that go in with the vaccine to help, quote unquote, help them absorb better, or preserve them in the jar. And this is what will freak you out. So the vaccine ingredients in a normal clinical environment is insane. If you look at the normal vaccine schedule, I think this book was published in 20. When was this book published? 2007. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7 vaccines. Some of them have multiple combinations in them, have anywhere between 125 to 850 micrograms of aluminum in there. The aluminum is supposedly, helps the body absorb the actual medicine, but it replaced another form of salt that did the same thing. So it was like a sodium chloride, not sodium chloride. I'll have to get it from the internet. But there was like a normal natural salt. They replaced it with aluminum throughout the last 50 years. For what reason, nobody knows. Cost, convenience, marginal increase in efficacy. There's not enough data around it. But these vaccines have anywhere between 295, if you get them all, this is like you're early in life and you're getting them as soon as you're born all the way to your like 12, 295 to 1,225 micrograms of aluminum, depending on what brands, how many, and really just depending on what brand you take. Now, the crazy thing is the FDA asserts that premature babies and any patient with impaired kidney function shouldn't get more than 10 to 25 micrograms of injected aluminum at one time. All of these vaccines have, at minimum, 125 micrograms or many times more of aluminum. That's crazy. That's crazy. What, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, does aluminum toxicity in infants and children cause? Neurological harm. A study from 30 years ago showed that human adults will increase their urine excretion of aluminum when exposed to higher levels, suggesting adults can clear excess aluminum. No such study was taken out on children. Adults taking aluminum-containing antacids don't build up high levels in their body. There have been reports of infants with healthy kidneys showing elevated blood levels of aluminum from taking antacids. People with kidney disease who build up levels of aluminum greater than 100 micrograms per liter in their bloodstream are at risk for toxicity. The toxic threshold for infants and children might be lower, and aluminum loading, so tissue buildup, has been seen in patients with healthy kidneys who receive IV solutions containing aluminum over extended periods. What does this mean? This means that for the average adult, we can get rid of aluminum in our bloodstream easily via healthy kidneys. But for children, it doesn't appear to be the case, and if they're premature and their kidneys aren't functioning properly, it's even worse. So a newborn has a blood volume of about 300 milliliters. So having more than 30 micrograms floating around in its bloodstream at once could be toxic. For a human, it's 500 micrograms at any given time. So the aluminum content of this vaccine is going to be critical and needs to be Zero. We need to have a vaccine that, let me see, what was that subject thing called? Um, it was, let me see, aluminum alternative for vaccines. This isn't crazy rocket science. Adjuvants, okay? Calcium phosphate, that's the substitute for aluminum adjuvants. Adjuvants is this extra things in the vaccine that help it perform better. Calcium phosphate, it was used up until aluminum was used as an adjuvant in France in diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, and poliomyelitis vaccines. It was later completely substituted by aluminum salts in the late 80s, but it still remains as an approved adjuvant for the World Health Organization for human vaccination. What are we doing? Listen to what happens if you get too much aluminum in your body. Oh, God. Let's see. The vaccine is also 4-6. Excretion, blah, blah, position do. So the group revealed that all the side effects testing for one particular aluminum containing vaccine and looked for any evidence. Where is it? It is, I'll have to find the exact language, but basically aluminum toxicity in young people can produce developmental delays. It builds up in the neurological system and it can cause developmental delays. Yeah, I'll have to find the thing. So I'll have to do a further research and maybe type this up and put it on the website. But basically, aluminum toxicity in adults can affect your nervous system. And in young infants, it can developmentally delay their everything, their development. Their brain is still forming, their bodies are still forming, the neurological system is still forming. And the question is, when you inject aluminum, it diffuses slowly. Does it diffuse slowly enough? Do the kidneys clear enough of it as it diffuses? Nobody knows. Nobody has tested that. Even though we know too much, even though any other injectable medicine is with aluminum has a toxicity warning, vaccines do not. And even though we know infants don't have the ability to uh, clear as much aluminum as adults, no one has looked into aluminum in vaccines. It's even though we know it delays their development neurologically, no one has looked into vaccine health and the aluminum in the vaccines. So all we need to do, I would assume, is use calcium phosphate. The content of the vaccine, I don't think, is a big issue. Your body, it either gets the disease that you're trying to fight off or it becomes immune to it. And you might get some redness or swelling at the site of the injection, but it's the aluminum that destroys, it seems to build up in neurological, the fat cells surrounding your nerves and damage them. So rushing into the market with a COVID-19 vaccine that we're all terrified of because of the media, and taking whatever Bill Gates happens to produce at one of his 7 multi-billion-dollar vaccine facilities is a mistake. Now, also, I'm no public health expert, but Why, if you look at COVID-19, first off, I was like really alarmist about it early on because the data was so startling. It was not only very aggressive like SARS and swine flu before it, which H1N1 swine flu or avian flu, um, H1N1 infected 1 billion people. It was like a big deal. It took a year to get there, but still, it just spread all over the planet. And in this case, the fatality rate of all people that get COVID-19 versus those that die seems to be lower than the 1% that were being shown, because the people being tested now are only the ones that are being that are having acute symptoms that are around, on the cusp of requiring hospitalization. And that's only 20% of people that get COVID-19 roughly require hospitalization. So, I'm looking at the data now and I'm seeing, oh man, the fatality rate is much lower probably than this 1%, which at 1% would make it 10 times more deadly than the flu. Point one. Point two is COVID-19, it's very bad for people with underlying health conditions caused by obesity, cardiovascular disease, cancer, and diabetes. If I already did say diabetes. So if you have these underlying conditions, your mortality rate increases. Now, I would like to know, so the argument right now being put out there is that we should all get this vaccine that's being rushed into production 10 times faster, produced 10 times faster than a normal vaccine, without the clinical trials to back up its safety, to protect people who are at risk of dying from COVID-19, this 1%. Well, that 1% might be inflated. At the same time, it's really people with underlying conditions that make up the bulk of that fatality rate, whatever it might be. I want to know what percent of those people are at risk for COVID-19 death because of lifestyle choices, because of adult onset diabetes, because of too much smoking, because of drug use, opioid use, alcoholism, cigarette smoking, vaping, uh, obesity due to poor diet. I want to know. I am not taking a rushed vaccine to protect the health of people that have spent their entire lives destroying their bodies. I will help them in any way I possibly can, but taking a mandatory vaccine is not one of those ways. And it's not going to happen. And I guarantee you, tens of millions of people across the country, across the planet, feel the same way, especially people in outside of New York City, where they're getting slammed the hardest. Now, I'm for social distancing. I'm for doing the things that are keeping the death rate low. But at a certain point, we got to go back to work here for the average person. We have to open up bars, restaurants, sporting events, public transit, boutique retail stores. The economy's got to get going again because we are dying of financial atrophy here. And the risks of staying closed too long are profound. Not only can we see spikes in suicide and mental health issues, that's one thing, but it's a more philosophical issue. Do we, as human beings, sit around waiting for our government check to come in so we can stay away from the scary virus that is being promulgated or communicated by, I don't know, 25 people across the world, including the World Health Organization, who refuses to say the word Taiwan to a Chinese newscaster for fear of what we don't know, who said human to human transmission is not an issue, who said face masks don't help, even though we see countries like, I believe, Switzerland and definitely Japan with very low mortality rates having not shut down their economy, but having encouraged every person to wear a face mask. And uh, effectively shielding China from any blame. Now, I will admit, this thing might have come from anywhere in the world, but it definitely festered in Wuhan and launched globally at a high rate due to seemingly their celebration of Chinese New Year's, where millions of people left that city and went across the world. Secondly, according to experts, this bug, this virus, came from a bat in the Wuhan province at a wet market. Now, were these bats being tested on in a biochemical facility and then someone sold them out the back door, as some have speculated? I don't know. That's really not important. That's a failure of an individual, not of a country. The country of China, the Communist Party of China, Chinese Communist Party, hid the severity of this illness. Whatever else happened, that's the truth. The WHO is complicit in those lies, and now we've all lost civil liberties. You can't go to a park, right? You can't in Charlotte, North Carolina, Mecklenburg County. You can't drive into the parking lot of a park and go for a walk. The parking lots are closed. You have to walk in or bike. What are we doing? What are we doing? And now with the spread of the hydrochloroquine, anti-malaria, and the Z-Pack combination that is being used on everybody in Italy, and Governor Cuomo of New York has asked for it to be used in New York City, it seems like there's a real treatment for this thing. If there's a treatment, which again, the WHO and even the CDC were cautious against, but thank God Trump said, I'm an optimist. It seems like he's working. Business people don't need all the data to say this is a good idea. Scientists need all the data, and they'll still say this might not work. So that's just the philosophy and the disposition of these two different people in society. It's common across all business people, and it's common across all scientists. I mean, seriously, that's how they think. So the nice tension between these two groups is really important, but obviously there's something to hydrochloroquine and Z-Pack that is effective. If doctors are asking for it, it means it's working anecdotally, and anecdotal evidence is a type of evidence. It's just an evidence of one with no control. So you have to take it with a grain of salt. But if everybody tells you that, that if everybody in America is saying that they feel like they're self-censoring, but there's no data to support it, you should look at that. The way all science works is there's a hypothesis that somebody has, it's a God-given inspiration, it's an aha moment, it's a gut instinct, it's an intuition, it's completely not data-based. Then they look for some anecdotal evidence to see is there something to this. Then they'll design an experiment to look for data, reproducible data. That's the flow of science. Anybody that ignores the first two steps is not a scientist, is just a data cruncher, a scientific accountant. And that's fine. They're useful too. There's a whole world that needs all sorts of people to function. But science starts with gut instincts and thought experiments. You've been granted this beautiful mind that's capable of crunching numbers and producing logical arguments that have never been thought of before. You're supposed to use that, think it through, and then design an experiment. The best discoveries on Earth were produced in the minds of people, written down, and then years later discovered proven via scientific experiment. The general theory of relativity started as a thought experiment. So anecdotal evidence is real, and the anecdotal evidence is showing that hydrochloroquine and zinc Z-Packs are effective. So if that's true, then we should all be relieved from quarantine, encouraged to wear masks, and allowed to go back into society. If we stay in this lockdown state for too long, we're at risk of accepting a draconian rule of law that says if you go out in public, you get fined, that you're not allowed to go visit your parents, Your grandparents are supposed to be alone. Your kids are not allowed to go and socialize at school. Everything you do has to be digitally. You have to communicate only digitally. No handshakes, no human contact. You need money because you were in entertainment, services, restaurants, hospitality, travel. You now need to rely on the federal government to pay for your sustenance. It's not enough to thrive or to do anything extra or retrain yourself. It's just enough to get by. You're supposed to go outside and be afraid of everybody, every surface, every store. Anybody out there is a vector for this disease. That's not a healthy way to live, and that's going to have detrimental effects on the human psyche. We are ultimately social creatures. We're meant to be out interacting up to a point, and then we go home and we rest. That is fundamentally how we have evolved. And to change that in a matter of a week and pretend it didn't exist is a big mistake. And it sets us up for a bleak future where we've accepted this low energy state, if you will, of human civilization, where collaboration, where protest, where exploration, where exercise, all these things that are so fundamental to human health, emotional, spiritual, and physical, are just completely taken away. And that is the real danger of a prolonged quarantine, the death of the human spirit. Now, if we combine that dying human spirit, that lack of hope, with a rushed vaccine that holds too much aluminum in it, then we are absolutely going to have a bad outcome. So, mandating the vaccine for a fatality rate that might be much lower, for a virus that might have a treatment, is a bad move if the vaccine, especially if the vaccine does not, has too much aluminum in it as an adjuvant. That is like three strikes, we're out. Not to mention being normalized to the idea of the state forcing you to take an injection. That is a bridge we cannot cross. That is a fundamental trespassing of human sovereignty. That is nothing short of Orwellian 1984, Fahrenheit 451. The great books reminding us of what a dystopian police state could look like could be coming true, and we might walk into it for fear of a virus that there's a treatment for and that is not actually killing as many people, especially if you've chosen to live your life in a relatively healthy manner. If you're obese, chronic smoker, you're in trouble. And you maybe should get the vaccine. Maybe the aluminum levels are worth the risk, right? It's up to you. We should all just be wearing masks and going about our day. That's it. Washing our hands and using hand sanitizer. That's it. That's all we need to do. And anything short of that is going to be a big mistake. I know AG Barr is saying this is, Attorney General Barr is saying these lockdown measures are becoming draconian. I know President Trump is saying, he said Easter, and I think the end of April is going to be enough is enough. And whatever the consequences might be, we have to protect our freedoms, because no matter what happens in the world, it seems like as soon as you give up a freedom, you never get it back. We got these crazy draconian wiretapping programs in America, which effectively through the NSA was global, and they never got repealed. I mean, it's insane. These people, the bureaucratic state, the administrative state of federal government, like any department, like any organization, as its budget and power grows, nobody wants to give up budget and power. And so they defend it. And so they use it. And so we get what we ask for. The risk of COVID-19 is lower every day if you don't have an underlying condition, if you wear a face mask. That's it, people. And with hydrochloroquine and Z-Pak, we can wait for a safe vaccine for anybody to take if they wish to do so. Again, I'm not taking the vaccine if your fat ass, excuse me, has smoked it your entire life. And so now you're at risk, and now I gotta dose my body up with some mystery substance. It's not happening. It's not happening. Tens of millions of Americans will not comply. And guess what? We won't do it, and we'll leave your state or your county if you force us to. It's simple as that. Your minor conveniences of living in a nice city don't matter compared to the rest of your life living with some foreign substance in your bloodstream that you didn't have the knowledge of understanding what it was going to do and what it couldn't do. So the goal for all of us, okay, let's say in 18 months we have a safe vaccine. And let's say there is no mandatory requirement because that would cause civil unrest. I guarantee you it would cause civil unrest. And President Trump would never do it. I promise you that right now. Certain states might, certain counties might try to, but do not comply with that law. Force it into the legal system so that the Supreme Court can rule it's unconstitutional because it is. There's an argument in there somewhere. I bet you it's illegal search and seizure of private property. You, as the government can't enter your house without a warrant, nor can they inject you with something, enter your bloodstream without one as well. That warrant can be contested and appealed. Do not comply. Wait for the data. Make sure it's safe. Make sure it's worth it. Again, the fatality rate, we're testing at 0.07 of the US population for COVID-19. Once we get to 7%, we're going to see a little bit more clearly. Until there's more data, do not take a government-forced vaccine at all. It's a bad, bad idea. You're better off in moving. What do you have to lose right now? You're either working remotely or you're out of work. Move. Don't take that vaccine. That's a terrible idea, and it puts you in a place with no leverage, no power, no authority, no sovereignty, which is going to kill your spirit as a human being. It will be like living in a cell spiritually. You have lost your freedom of choice. So let's talk about genomic stability. Now, I'm no doctor, I'm no science. I mean, I'm a citizen scientist. I studied physics. I'm a biophysics amateur. I love it, and that's what I'm pursuing. But if we want to stay healthy, what does it mean to stay healthy? Your body has an immune system. It has all sorts of functions and chemicals and enzymes and proteins it uses to clean out the nasty stuff, keep them from, you already have viruses in your body right now, but they don't grow and proliferate at a rate fast enough to overrun your system. When your immune system is suppressed, then they flourish. If you have a apple sitting on the counter, eventually the mold that's in the air will be able to live off it and grow fast enough on it because of an environment created locally on the skin of the apple. And as the mold grows and as the apple's natural proteins and enzymes break down, it will have more food, and that local environment will grow to encompass the whole apple eventually. It must be the same way in our bodies, I would assume, that your local environment dictates the ability of a virus or bacteria or parasite to prosper and multiply. So how do we keep our local environments healthy? I assume it's by making sure our immune systems, that we create an environment in our bodies for our immune system to flourish and to be top notch, right? So just like an aquaponics system where you have good bacteria and bad bacteria, you have to create an environment for the good bacteria to prosper. They need a lot of oxygen and a certain water temperature and pH. If the oxygen level drops, guess what? Every bad bacteria in an aquaponics system, and it turns out for a human being, requires an oxygen negative environment. So there's a lack of oxygen. They proliferate in oxygen depleted environments. That's why hydrogen peroxide works. It's when it sprays and hits a surface, it's H2O2, and the O2. How does it work again? The H2O2 hits a bacteria, the bacteria has an extra electron in it, and this combination effectively or is it the other way around? Dang, I should look into that. Hydrogen peroxide bubbles because it is ripping apart the cells of bacteria, and what's ripping apart those cells is an electron moving. I can't remember if it's moving in or moving out, but the movement of electron through the barrier of the bacteria wall rips it apart, and this breaks up the H2O2, and the hydrogen ion does that thing. The one oxygen ion does that thing, and then what is it? Yeah, and the oxygen ion escapes, and you see the bubble. I got to look back into that science, but basically what's happening is it's oxidizing, which means it is absorbing a electron from a bacteria, just like the water that has a lot of charge in it. Oh no, dang, that's really interesting. I'm gonna do a whole thing on that. But it turns out that I gotta refresh my memory. But it turns out that every bacteria that's bad for you requires an oxygen low environment, and that's just the way nature made it. I don't understand it, but those are the rules of the game. So, getting back to our bodies, I believe if we can increase the genomic stability of every one of our cells, including our immune cells, we will have a better chance at fighting off any disorder or disease. How do we do that? Well, the science is very clear. The science says that if you provide the right minerals, vitamins, and antioxidants, if you will, for a newly formed cell, it will increase its genomic stability. If you don't have one of those vitamins, the cell will be made without everything it needs, and it will break down faster. And if this happens at scale, that'll lead to disease and cancers. Let's see. There's a big article on NIH.gov, The Influence of Micronutrients in Cell Culture, a reflection on viability and genomic stability. So here's the gist of it. Micronutrients, including minerals and vitamins, are indispensable to DNA metabolic pathways and thus are as important for life as macronutrients. Without the proper nutrients, genomic instability compromises homeostasis, leading to chronic diseases and certain types of cancer. So this is the crazy thing. This is how poorly the entire scientific community appreciates diet, and at the cellular level even, right? They are so ignorant of the need for micronutrients that they don't even think cells need micronutrients, let alone themselves. If you've ever seen a doctor, they're usually unhealthy, and it's usually diet-led. So cell culture media try to mimic the in vivo environment, providing in vitro models used to infer cells' responses to different stimuli. So cell culture media is the material that they use in petri dishes, aka in vivo environments, artificial environments, where they place cells and grow them out and then see how they respond to different stimuli. It might be a virus, might be a drug, might be a chemical, what have you. So they can model what would happen in a similar situation in a body. This review summarizes and discusses studies of cell culture supplementation with micronutrients that can increase cell viability and genomic stability, with a particular focus on previous in vitro experiments. In these studies, the cell culture media includes certain vitamins and minerals at concentrations not equal to the physiological level. Here's the crazy part, okay? This should blow your mind. In many common culture media, the sole sources of micronutrients is fetal bovine serum, which contributes to only 5 to 10% of media composition. Minimal attention has been dedicated to FBS composition, micronutrients in cell cultures as a whole, or the influence of micronutrients on the viability of genetics of cultured cells. Further studies better evaluating micronutrient roles at a molecular level and influence on the genomic stability of cells are needed. Okay, so in those cell cultures of petri dishes, the most common source of these nutrients is a material called fetal bovine serum, FBS. It's literally baby cow blood, filtered and processed. It's only 5 to 10% of this media, the material that they grow the cells on top of in a petri dish. No one has looked at how the micronutrients in cell cultures, the media, contributes to the health of a cell, aka the viability and genetics of cultured cells. Nobody has looked at that. The number one source of nutrients for new cells grown in a petri dish, fetal bovine serum, lacks a plethora of micronutrients. Thus, we're testing everything across the whole world. Every petri dish, every lab is running experiments on cells that are effectively only living off of junk food. Junk food being, yeah, sure, it's got a lot of sugar, a lot of protein, a lot of carbohydrates, so it's a lot of energy. There's a lot of the macronutrients, so to speak, but it doesn't have the amount of zinc, magnesium, manganese, copper, iron, calcium. Maybe it has calcium, right? All the little stuff that nobody cares about. All these, 12, it goes into great detail about all the micronutrients and macronutrients needed in a cell and how they affect it. So vitamin A, B7, B9, deficiency in vitamin B9 or folic acid leads to all these things, colon cancer and so on. Vitamin C, like the big stuff people have, but like copper, iron, manganese, selenium, zinc, and so on, a deficiency in any one of those leads to diseases in the human body. So why wouldn't it lead to disease or dysfunction in a single cell? I use the analogy of a house. Every day your body's building 200 billion homes. And they're getting built no matter what, come hell or high water. Half of those, 100 billion, are immune cells because I believe they're used very much. They go through a lot of stress and they break up and they need to get rebuilt constantly. Now, every home, no matter how custom it is or whatnot, it needs lumber, it needs brick, it needs iron, it needs copper wires, it needs light bulbs, right? It needs paint, drywall, so on. Shingles, right? Nails, screws. And it needs them in certain proportions, right? My house, let's say, for every 100 square feet, it needs this many nails, this many feet of lumber, this many bricks, and so on. So if I'm building 1,000 square foot home and I don't have enough copper, I still got to build that house. Well, it turns out the wiring isn't going to be done right. And I might have to skimp on the wiring. And now instead of using whatever gauge, I'm using cheaper gauge. And if you've ever been in a house with electrical problems, you know that cheap wiring leads to shortages, short circuits, and sometimes fires, right? I don't have enough shingles. I'm building this thing no matter what. I'm going to make it happen. And it's got to be a certain size because it has a specific function, the cell. Well, if it doesn't have enough shingles, the roof is going to leak sooner, and it's going to, instead of going 20 years without any problems, it's going to go 10 years, right? And now I have water leaking into the house, mold outbreak, new roof. It's going to cost me a ton of money just to replace all this damage. That's the same thing that's going on in our cells. And that's what cancer ultimately is caused by, is a proliferation of cells in that are being built incorrectly and whose environment is causing them to be built incorrectly, and they're going haywire, and then they just start growing and going malignant at a certain point when their environment, I guess, becomes so unbearable that they want out. I'm no expert, but certainly chronic diseases like arthritis in the joints has to do with osteoporosis, right? You're not building enough you're losing bone mass. Why are you losing bone mass? Because you're probably not taking in enough calcium, and so your body needs to eat your own bones to produce the break down into the calcium to produce the new cells it needs to keep the whole thing going. And so it's atrophying internally. Like, this is the problem we all have. And you can't seem to go to the store to solve it because our food has been grown to last a long time on shelves, to be shelf stable and to be sweeter, not to be more nutritious. We haven't hybridized our food to be as nutritious as possible because that's not what consumers wanted. They didn't even know, right? They didn't think you'd be giving up nutrients for better flavor. And so that system cannot revert or adjust to produce nutritionally optimized crops fast enough. And I mean, it'll take generations of crops. It's years and years and years. So that's not going to save us. Synthetic supplements, the science shows clearly, do not absorb into new cells. What does are food source supplements, but we're not getting, it's hard to get enough manganese from spinach these days. You have to eat a lot of spinach. So the solution, what does absorb provably, scientifically, into new cells, according to science, it's been proven to absorb into new breast milk cells and new bone cells, are plant-based extracts. So you take a plant with a lot of whatever, you dry it up, you grind it, and you drink it, in a big dish or in a big, milkshake or whatever, and you're taking in a concentrated form of that. Well, what you start with, so that's what we should all be focused on. Okay, I don't care where you get your plant-based extracts from. However, according to the science, microgreens have some of the highest levels, concentrations of minerals and vitamins. So it stands to reason if we produce our own vitamins, our own microgreens, consume them, we're going to be in better shape than if we didn't. And the interesting thing is, if we do this and ingest these plant-based extracts, however that happens, there's a million ways to do that. You can go out and buy spirulina powder or seaweed extract, right? You just need a full spectrum. And the plants already know how to produce these things perfectly in a bioavailable form with other phytochemicals that produce some sort of synergistic effect. Like, it's mysterious why we get so much benefit from an apple that doesn't have much in it, but it's in its skin, like a certain, what is it called? A certain type of vitamin. I can't remember which vitamin, but it's hypothesized that because there's other phytochemicals in there, chemicals that the plant produce, that help the uptake of this thing that we do want. And so when we make the synthetic version, all we do is try to isolate and produce whatever the thing is that we think is important, but we haven't measured for and reproduced the supportive phytochemicals that help this thing get into where it needs to go. And so that's a big problem with synthetic vitamins. According to the science, according to the best hypotheses, nobody really knows. But vitamins are just going to go in one hole and out the other. They're not going to do anything. One end out the other. So producing our own seems to be the best route. And the interesting thing is, we're producing 100 billion new immune cells every single day on average. That means every day we have the opportunity to equip a whole galaxy's worth of immune cells to protect us against anything, right? Very few diseases out there are 100% fatal. So it's not like we have to, spend a month. It seems like if we take this approach to ingesting, however we do it, a plant-based extract of minerals and vitamins, we get results within 24 hours. And so it seems to me like I would hypothesize in a week, if we do it for a week to a month, we'll have a really good, healthy immune system, which I believe would make this a situation where we can quickly get back on track. We can quickly, after a lifetime of malnutrition, if you will, malnutrition, we can become healthy in a very short period of time. And that is really exciting to me. So I hope you do it. I hope you stay hydrated. If you want to support this project so we can measure what we're doing and pay for lab tests and expand our production capabilities, go ahead to stack.farm, buy yourself a 10-pack, buy yourself several of them, you save money. It's $20 for 10 doses of Genomic Stability tea. Unlike anything else, you can grow it yourself. We're here to help. If you don't want to spend the money and the time, we've made it as simple as possible, but it is still a new, you have to be and accept the research and development, the tinkeringness of it. It is pretty darn cool. Let me see if I can flip the camera around and take you for a tour of what's going on here. All right, so this is my stack farm. It's on a 2x3 shelving unit, and I'm getting some lag here. So maybe what I should do is use the front. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So there's a 5-gallon bucket down there pumping a water-soluble fertilizer through the system. It goes to the top, and then let's see, well, there's a lot of experiments going on right now, but it goes down to the bottom, and it's just a continuous cycle. So here I'm experimenting with new media. This is Grodan media, and I'm seeing if I can plant directly on it, which I already don't like, versus growing it in seeds in trays and then letting the plant roots touch down into the bottom and tap into the water reservoir below. And this thing produces about $1,000 to $2,000 worth of product a month, and I believe it's going to lead to a whole new era of biomanufacturing, because when we can produce our own plant-based chemicals locally, we're going to be able to produce foods, obviously, nutraceuticals, meaning we could produce this stuff and pull out, all the plants, dry them up, powderize it, and it could turn into a mineral compound that you can then reinsert into other products like cereals, like drinks, like yogurt, whatever it is, right? That's a whole giant industry, and then eventually also biopharmaceuticals. So I hope that some of the vaccines in a year or two are produced, all the vaccines being produced for COVID-19 are an mRNA type vaccine, which can be, is grown, produced in the cell of a bacterium. It can also be grown in an algae, or the viruses, can be injected into plants, and those plants can grow, thus producing more viri, thus producing more of the vaccine. And if that stuff gets into a non-aluminum adjuvanted vaccine, then I think we're good. And as long as those vaccines aren't mandated by law, but clearly proven to be healthy and effective, then we're good. So with that, I thank you so much. Go over to stack.farm, download the parts list. You can have it for life. It's free, and no one will be able to take the knowledge away from you of how to produce your own nutraceuticals and hopefully start your own nutraceutical consumer packaged goods business out of your garage or basement. All right. Godspeed, everybody, and see you tomorrow. Bye.